Wikipedia. It's the heart of the information age of the internet. It's the thing that we all source whenever we need to know a quick general overview of a topic. It's a thing you never reference on a research article, but you still look at it because you need a good place to start. This website has been the benchmark for so many things when it comes to contemporary internet culture. When you need to source something to argue against someone in the internet comments, when you need to just have an idea about what is that thing you mentioned here. When you want to know more about the world, typically the first place you turn to is Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is a good source for a lot of things. They take different sources, compile them together before allowing any claims to be stated. If you don't have a source, you typically aren't allowed to say that on Wikipedia. However, this does lead to a bias. Now, don't get me wrong. I think this is amazing. I'm personally very pro what's known as positivism. This is the idea that there's an objective reality, and if we remove our biases, we can get closer to that objective reality. Most science works with this model of positivism. And then there's post-positivism, which adds a little bit of bias to it in like an understanding way. But this video isn't just about methodology. There is an issue though with solely using this methodology. Wikipedia is very ethnocentric. What this means is Wikipedia tends to reflect the community that creates its information. So, in other words, it's going to reflect the creators who make edits to articles and those who take time out of their day to then reflect on those edits and make adjustments. Again, this is not inherently a bad thing, but where it can become problematic is when we look at the community overall, it's mostly white men. Now, this is coming from a white man myself, so I'm not immediately like, oh, scary. But that does create a bias. Wikipedia tends to have more articles written about things that white men prefer. Those tends to be the topics that get more fleshed out because that's what the community who writes these articles are. When we look at Wikipedia's featured article pages, they tend to be more likely about sports or war or other masculine-related things. When it comes to articles about the slave trade, we see it from a European bias because most people who write these articles are white Europeans. Even if they don't live in Europe, they effectively have came from there. Hi, Future Noah here. I realized I forgot some important context. When it comes to bias on Wikipedia, I should explain that it's not necessarily just because the community is mostly white men. That's a factor, but that's not the main factor. The factor that matters when it comes to this bias is that Wikipedia requires multiple sources. Now, this is inherently a good thing, but because it requires multiple sources from scientific journals or published news articles or other forms of primary or secondary sources, it ultimately ends up carrying the same biases that those institutions have. And historically, there's been some biases in academia. Scientific racism was once seen as just the normal standard. Seeing certain people as lesser was just the normal standard. And as we piece through parts of history and have to use these references to build out these articles, those biases are going to seep in. Even if we do everything we can to try to help change it, Wikipedia requires you to source everything and not to synthesize or generate new information. So these biases from the past will slip in. Now, over time, ideally this will be resolved, but that's going to still be a historic bias, which will always be present because of the nature of academia. Well, now with that little side tangent out of the way, how do we get around these biases? This is a big issue on Wikipedia, and the Wiki Foundation even knows this. Your first thought might be, what if we try to make it more diverse? What if we just throw more people onto here from different backgrounds? And that's an amazing first step, but it has to be seen as a first step. Wikipedia, for as wonderful as it is, it does push away people of color and people who are not cis white straight men. How? How does it do this? This seems like a kind of bullshit claim, let's be real. We just have to turn to the talk page. So on Wikipedia, there's two sides of every article. There's the article itself, which has all its information as up to date as possible. Then there's the talk page. This is the page where people go to when they want to discuss edits, when they want to discuss what should actually be on this website we call home. And while the public page has to be very factual, has to have all these sources, the talk page doesn't require that. You can add your opinion on the talk page. This is where you get the mushy feeling stuff. This is where you get those debates. And while the idea is that through debate, good outcomes will come out, ultimately, if something's decided just solely democratically, the biases and misinformation are going to reflect the biases of the community. So when we turn to these talk pages, we see an issue where new editors are typically seen as less valid, as they should take a step back, just sit and watch how this works. They shouldn't engage until they know everything, which at first, again, seems very understandable. But what happens when the thing you're trying to engage with is the fact that a euphemism for slaves were farm workers? When you conflate slavery with paid labor, as happened historically on the United Farm Workers webpage, you get some issues. Or another example, what if we're talking about the Atlantic slave trade, and you take, for example, the old world and the new world, and you look at it from that, and those terms already carry some bias. Old world is Afro-Eurasia, so Africa, Asia, Europe. And this new world of the Americas, it's only new to a certain set of people. Now this seems like semantics, this seems like I'm just arguing, oh, tiny words. But these tiny words do have a ripple effect. We look at it from this bias, we look at these biases, and while one or two little biases may not make that big of a difference, they may not affect the overall content of a single article. What if we take that and then we also happen to neglect looking at the role of Africa in the slave trade? That's a big chunk we're cutting out. And what if we try to look at the slave trade and the Columbian exchange from the outlook of the natives? Why, that's also missing. That's valuable information. If you want a full history, you need to know it. And Wikipedia isn't trying to be a full history. Wikipedia is meant to be a free encyclopedia. That's their tagline. But there are these biases. So Wikimedia has a different solution. What they do is they partner with college professors to engage their students with Wikipedia and that content generation, that knowledge generation. This has a twofold effect, and personally, I really like this solution. It, one, allows the students to get a grasp on how do you actually write and generate knowledge scientifically, and two, it allows people who typically wouldn't engage in these situations, who typically wouldn't engage in how do you actually vet and edit articles, to do it. This adds that diversity back in without necessarily having as strong of a pushback, because it's a college assignment now. You're going to get that done even if a random person online says you don't belong there. You want the A. I really like this solution. And this solution actually helped edit both the United Farm Workers article and the Columbian Exchange article, and it helped correct errors in those and other articles. This specific study also engaged with just how does race and gender influence knowledge production. Highly recommend reading this study. It's publicly available, links in the description. But even this solution still has drawbacks, still has issues. What are these issues? Well, first and foremost, most people who edit these articles or create new articles because of these assignments don't continue to engage with Wikipedia after the class ends. Understandable. I get it. I haven't written a scientific study since undergrad. I understand, class ends, you're kind of just done with it, you move forward. On the other hand, it also creates an issue where you generate this knowledge, you generate these things, and you edit and fix, let's say it's a class of 20 people, 20 articles. There's thousands of articles being edited and changed and produced every day, and you get maybe 10 solid changes every 3 to 4 months. That's not a sustainable solution if we want widespread, say it with me now, systematic change. If we want things to actually change with how people interact and respond to Wikipedia. But it's a step in the right direction. And demystifying Wikipedia, making it so people aren't afraid to actually go and do that research, that does have ripple effects. If you have once edited a Wikipedia article, if you once sat down and engaged with it, suddenly this scary behemoth of a community shrinks down and it becomes touchable. you understand it more. You see its biases, you know how to engage with its biases, and you can get more out of it. So, what's the solution in all of this? What do you do? Well, simply, you engage. You recognize there are biases on this website. I mean, if it mostly caters towards one demographic, you have to purposefully go in and reject that. You go edit articles, you go produce articles, you change it from within. Patricia Hill Collins has this idea, the outsider within, where what she did and what she encouraged Black women to do was to infiltrate these organizations and better them by going in, pretending to basically be part of the system to change the system from inside out. It's a very democratic way of doing it. And if we can all embrace that outsider within ideology to make change, to make things more equitable, to make information better, we can have the free encyclopedia of Wikipedia become better for everyone. That's how we start towards this solution. And we all just need to take efforts towards it. It's a community of people after all. And coming together, this will better Wikipedia and will better ourselves. Now, what do I mean by that part? We just saw how this helps the wider world and all these things, but what do I get out of it? Why should I want to do this? Well, besides just demystifying this behemoth of an institution, it also teaches you how to write better. It teaches you how to engage in conversation, in objective facts, in a way that actually takes effort and is easily digestible. I don't know about you, but how many times have you tried to explain a concept to someone and you just couldn't quite find the words to explain it, but you knew what it was, but just the words weren't coming? This forces you to practice getting those words to come to you. This forces you to practice how do you synthesize and generate information in a way that most people can understand. How do you engage with sources? What is a good source? And then let's not be idealistic. Someone comes along and says, you're wrong. It then forces you to engage with how do you settle disputes without it blowing up. Because if it blows up, if you stop assuming positive intent, one of the social norms on the website, you're not doing it well, and you're not knowing how to engage. So by editing these articles, you learn how to write better. You learn how to engage with people who disagree better. You learn how to source information better. It makes you a better consumer of knowledge, better producer of knowledge, and better just person overall because you can actually discuss things with people. So that's why you should do this. That's why you should go and edit these articles, edit Wikipedia, edit things, and actually learn how to engage with others on this grandiose mission of trying to better yourself and society through collective information sharing. It's only through community can we improve. Thank you.
You need help? Is that filming you?
Yeah, at least I hope so.